Hello students, welcome to the Analyst dated 14th of November 2023. Today we'll look at 5 important articles from the Indian Express and the Hindu. The first article will be regarding Firecracker Ban and the legality thereof. Then we'll look at the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Then we'll look at Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. And finally we'll look at GEM or Government E-Marketplace, and lastly retail inflation, that is CPI. So let's start with the first article, that is Firecracker Ban. And this is in news. Why? Because the firecracker ban has been flouted extremely in Delhi NCR. Now let's understand that when we are talking about air pollution, particularly about Delhi NCR region, the air pollution becomes extremely severe during the month of November. November is also the time of a festive month. It also coincides with the festive months of, let's say, Dussehra to Diwali. Now, simultaneously, the issue of stubble burning also props up. So, due to firecrackers, the issue of air quality used to become more severe. So, arguing on this ground that firecrackers become extremely dangerous and they add to the toxic mix that is in Delhi NCR region, two infants through their children or through their guardian went to the Supreme Court to seek a ban on the firecrackers on the argument of Article 21, that is their right to life and liberty, while also arguing for right to clean air and a cleaner environment. So on these arguments, the petitioners, they argued before the court that the use of, let's say, barium salts and toxic elements, they somehow are positioned in such a way that it directly harms the human beings and more particularly the vulnerable section like elderly, like children. So what happened is that the other side contended that the firecracker is nothing but a part of Diwali celebrations, and Diwali is the festival of Hindus and is celebrated widely all across India. And therefore, the use of firecrackers to celebrate Diwali was nothing but an essential practice of religion. And this essential practice or essential religious practice has now the defense of Article 25. That is, it has the defense of your religious rights. So it was a debate between your Article 21 versus Article 25. However, the court held that going for firecrackers thereof to celebrate Diwali is not an essential practice. Is not an essential practice to the Diwali festival itself. And it is only post-industrial revolution that these firecrackers have entered into our celebratory environment. Therefore, there was a ban put on firecrackers in that entire region. And simultaneously, a new concept of green crackers was introduced. So idea is that green crackers are not absolutely green. That doesn't mean that they are not emitting smoke. That simply means that they are modified form of chemicals which will have little or a lesser impact in terms of environmental pollution. But it categorically denied the use of barium salts and joined firecrackers. The way, let's say this is a firecracker and I join it with another firecracker. So joined firecrackers, they were banned and barium salts were completely banned. Then this matter went multiple times to the Supreme Court in terms of appeal by related parties. So in 2013, the Supreme Court again junked a plea by the Firecracker Manufacturer Association to allow use of joined crackers and to add barium with improved additives in green crackers. So all those ideas of using directly, indirectly barium or joined firecrackers was denied by the court. Now simultaneously what happened, this is pertaining to all India. Simultaneously what happened, the NGT came with an own set of guidelines in 2020 where it said that there is no need to go for any firecrackers. So firecracker, whether they are green or not, they are not allowed in Delhi NCR region. Why? Because of the pollution. And we must appreciate this point of time that any city in NCR region, if they are going for, this is let's say Delhi, and let's say there are multiple cities all around Delhi in form of a ring. If any of these cities are going for firecrackers, then it doesn't matter if the Lutyens Delhi is going for firecracker ban. Why? Because it is a complete air region or air shed, and so the air will naturally sink in towards the center because of the geographical conditions. So now NGT, using this argument, put a ban on all types of firecrackers, all firecrackers, whether green or not, in NCR region. So now what do we have, that in all India, we can go for firecrackers, but except with the exception of barium and going for joint crackers. But NGT modified this order saying that NCR cannot go for any kind of firecrackers, and next the other regions of India will go for green firecrackers on the basis of their air quality, only if the air quality index is moderate. Now we must understand that some of these aspects can be important for prelims. For example, the red color that we see in our firecracker comes from lithium compounds, green from barium, white from aluminium, blues from copper, and glitter effect from antimony sulfide. So this is something that we should keep handy in our notes. Now, what are the concerns? So, concerns is about air quality index, about particulate matter, and then it will lead to other effects like your brown haze. And again, creation of that toxic mix with a temperature inversion. So, the severe air quality will remain there for few days or at least few weeks. Then there are health concerns. Why? Because we are somehow emitting these toxic substances like cadmium, lead, chromium, and we have seen that diseases like itai, blue baby syndrome, and such diseases are caused due to such contaminants, not only in air but also in soil or water. Then simultaneously we know that if the firecracker industry is employing children, rampant violation, and children are with their soft hands, they are being used to manufacture these firecrackers, they are also exposed to these substances and therefore making them vulnerable to these diseases caused by, let's say, lithium, barium, etc. Then if humans are impacted, naturally the entire environment, including the biodiversity, including your soil, air, so all the connected systems, whether we are talking about air or we are talking about, let's say, soil, or let's say we are talking about the bios where animals, plants, humans, they live, even microbes. So naturally, if there is pollution, it will affect the entire region. Then it will mostly affect, let's say, people with comorbidities, children, elderly, pregnant women. So all will be extremely affected. Now, the challenges with the ban stays that because it is a air shed, so if let's say three limbs of a car are working fine, but one of the wheel is not working, then this such bans will not work. Let's say this is Delhi, and Delhi is following odd even, but rest of the region is pumping in lots of pollutants through industries, through firecrackers, or through, let's say, stubble burning. Then what will happen to Delhi? No drastic change will come to the air quality index. Then naturally, if there is a firecracker ban or there is modification in firecrackers, what happens is all the people who tend to depend So all the families which are dependent for their livelihood on the firecracker industry, or let's say it's manufacturing, they will all be rendered jobless or their economies may decrease. Then it is argued that such modifications are purposefully only objected to selective festivals only. Why the arguments of environment would be raised on only few festivals? And why not all the festivals go green, go clean, right? Now, the way forward is very simple, that not we cannot go for this zero sum game approach. Rather, we have to go towards a holistic environmental solution. That means I must look at diesel, I must look at petrol, I must look at, let's say, thermal power plant, I must look at construction and demolition waste, I must look at burning of waste, I must look at any open barren lands, and I must look at, let's say, green cover, sponges, wet areas. So I have to go for a holistic solution of the entire region, and I cannot behave in isolation. I cannot say that we have to curtail we have to improve the air quality index of a particular region of the city. Rather, we have to go for the air quality index of the entire region. Why? Because we are living in an air shed. Let's understand the particularly vulnerable tribal group. And the Prime Minister is to launch Viksit Bharat Sankalp Yatra and PM PVTG mission. In this perspective, we must understand what a PVTG is. Now, whenever we are talking about particularly vulnerable tribal group, we must understand these are nothing but they are tribes. And therefore, we must look at the scheduled tribes of India. And so, according to the 2011 census, we have approximately 10 crore. The population is 10 crore of tribes, which constitute 8.6% of the Indian population. Now, what are the regions where the tribes are living? So, usually they are forested areas, hilly areas, difficult terrain, maybe mineral belts, maybe left-wing extremism regions. So it is more of an overlap of all these regions of India. Now, what are the typical characteristics? So there'll be primitive traits. That means, let's say, there will be a lot of divides. For example, lack of use of smartphone, or let's say internet, or let's say lack of connectivity in terms of, let's say, road, in terms of rail. So accessibility, connectivity, that is lagging when we compare with rest of the regions of India. Geographical isolation is natural. Why? Because we are living in natural regions. So these natural regions, and I am dependent on nature. So let's say water, land and forest. That is Jal, Jungle, Jameen. Then I have this uniqueness in culture, and I have protected my culture. But I am homogeneous, so I am heterogeneous with others. I am heterogeneous with other communities, but I am homogeneous within. I have a very close-knit tribal society where barter is still the most common form of trade. So, trade and communication with each other or business with each other, that has not been monetized completely, and therefore it is mostly about interpersonal relations. Then naturally they'll be economically backward. Why? Because they have not been monetized. So let's say a good art can very well be exchanged for some rice. On the other hand, if I sell the art, it may yield me 10,000 rupees in the market, but it is simply exchanged for rice. Why? Because it is a homogeneous society and heterogeneous with others. Because of this, the Ministry of Tribal Affairs was bifurcated from Ministry of Social Justice in 1999. And the idea is to go for integrated socio-economic development of the scheduled tribes, where three important pillars, that is social empowerment, economic empowerment, and social justice. These are the three pillars on which the Ministry of Tribal Affairs works. Now, when we look at the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, let's say that a community within, let's say, tribes, there are some tribes who are, let's say, educated or who have a developmental inertia. Because of this developmental inertia, what would happen? That when the government announces multiple aids, schemes, or any affirmative action, so what will happen? The bulk of the affirmative action will go to the higher class within the caste group, right? So if some group within the tribes, they are at an advantage, they would seem to have a higher representation, let's say in legislature also, in jobs also, while the rest of the group will not be properly represented. That means, let's say 25% of the communities will get more than 80% of the community resources, including the jobs, including the seats in IITs, IIMs. Now, given that this was putting a lot of tribes and lot of tribal groups at a disadvantage, the Devbhar committee, it recommended for a classification of PVTGs. Now in India today we have 75 PVTGs, 75 tribes which are classified as PVTGs. That means the PVTGs are nothing but they are the most disadvantaged within tribes. That means if we compare them with the scheduled tribes, then they have even poorer literacy or connectivity. They are extremely heterogeneous with others, but they are extremely homogeneous within themselves. Then they have a very small population. At times this population is not increasing or declining because of diseases. Then they are physically isolated. So let's say a tribal group, a PVTG group living on a single hillock. So physical isolation. Then absence of written language. Simple technology, using still primitive tools and practicing primitive living, practicing primitive clothing, practicing primitive model of agriculture also. Therefore, they have been classified as PVTG within the tribes. And the PM PVTG mission, it will look into what? It will look into the basics. Basics of, let's say, livelihood, housing, clean drinking water. So all these facilities, they will be converged at the block level, the subdivision level, at the local level, so that it directly benefits the particularly vulnerable tribal group. And it is a good example of Antyodaya. Now in India, there are 75 PVTGs and Odisha has the highest number of PVTGs with more than 2.5 lakh of population. Let's look at Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and this pertains to your internal security as well as Indian Constitution. Now the center extends UAPA ban on 8 Methi extremist organization, and this pertains to the Manipur ethnic conflict. Now what is the need of UAPA is that there is a menace of organized crime. This organized crime, it has over the period of time been feeding, let's say, extremism, or let's say it is feeding on terrorism. So when the organized crime, it creates its linkages, its tentacles with other security threats, it becomes a national security threat. And this has become a modus operandi of all the organized criminal groups to sustain themselves and to get more business from the terrorist organization. So, direct linkages with terrorism, then linkages with white collar crimes using complex corporate structure and linking it with money laundering or let's say terror financing. So a single embezzlement of fund and then round tipping it, then going for money laundering structures to finally feed the money into a terrorist group, that has become very frequent not only in India but across the world. Then the idea of unidentified beneficiary in the era of let's say crypto, in the era of cryptocurrency. Then internet and social media. Here what has happened is that a massification. So earlier, we never had the bank accounts. Today, we have Jan Dhan accounts, but we also have UPI. Now, the structure of UPI Aadhaar, this can be misused to create small deposits, and then these small deposits can be round tipped or can be moved to the main account where the money has to go. So, it is very difficult to understand the entire network that has been created due to massification of internet, social media, and creation of the financial stacks that we have created on the basis of Aadhaar. Then, going for political canvassing, the use of fourth and fifth generation warfare, let's say some subversive activities which are, let's say, perpetrated by our neighbors. Why? To create discomfort or to create some secessionist activities in India. Then these are extremely sophisticated attacks. And today, what do we see? We see that use of social media, then use of financial technology, and the use of political canvassing together to run sophisticated movements. So, movements which are promoted and which are financed through these sophisticated corporate structures to, let's say, round tip money through NGOs, through large NGOs into smaller NGOs, and to fund these protest movements all across the world, and thereby meddling into the internal affairs. That requires some stronger laws and some supervision so that the security of the state is maintained. Now, let's look at UAPA. So, it is an alternate criminal law framework. So, let's say I am not guilty until it is proven that I am guilty, right? I am innocent until I am proven guilty. Now, this is a criminal law framework, but whenever we are looking at these stringent laws like UAPA or NSA, this leniency is curtailed and they become more stringent. And at times, the onus is on the accused to prove his or her innocence. Now, there is also relaxed timelines of filing of charge sheet. That means more time and more authority to the law enforcement agencies. So the law enforcement agencies will have higher powers and they will have more relaxed timeline so that they can question these perpetrators or the accused, and the stringent conditions for bail. So usually what we see in criminal law is bail is the norm and jail is an exception. So all such basic ground norms of criminal law are relaxed when we look at UAPA, NSA, NIA acts. Then the idea is to prevent unlawful association. So whenever we are talking about, let's say, freedom of speech and expression, creation of, let's say, association, these are what? These are part of our rights under Article 19. But this is an unlawful association. So this law somehow will also be a reasonable restriction. Restriction why? Because the state has to protect its own security. So this law, it prevents any unlawful association or unlawful activity. Where? Within India or abroad. So, if somebody is defacing with the Indian flag in front of the consulate, then it can very well come under UAPA, and the NIA can very well take up such investigations. Then, the central government has the power authority to declare any activity as unlawful, and then this law has stringent punishment including death penalty and life imprisonment. Now, what do we understand by unlawful activity? So, any action taken by a single person or an association, so one person or multiple person, through an act, word, spoken or written, or by signs. That means any form of expression. To do what? So intended to support a claim to bring about secession of a part of territory of India. That means either to cede a territory of India or to promote secession. That means any vociferous activities, let's say going for any independence based movements, going for secession in any of the state of India or a region of a state of India or combination of regions within different states. So all of that will come under this review, or which incites any individual or group of individual to bring about secession or secession. So all such activities will be unlawful activities. Now, the idea of terrorism was not there earlier. So this act is a 1967 act. So in 1967 act, there was no terrorism. So in 2004, what happened is that the UPC syllabus says that organized crime and its linkages with terrorism. So similarly, in 2004, what happened is that UAPA, which was earlier mostly used to tackle organized crime, got its linkage to terrorism. Why? Because 2004 amendment broadened the definition of unlawful activities to include terrorism, resulting in ban of organization. And what happened in 2019? That this law became even severer. How? So now you can go for bodies, you can declare bodies which are unlawful. You can tell that acts which are unlawful activities. And now you can also go for individuals, that this particular individual is a terrorist. Let's say going for Hafiz Saeed. So we can declare, and we've declared such terrorist under UAPA. Then there can be attachment of property, and we must understand that whenever we are looking at proceeds of crime and we are able to hit it, so what happens is that the financial backbone of any crime or crime network, crime syndicate, that is broken. So this attachment of property is also there, and it empowers NIA officers ranked inspector or above to investigate terrorism cases in addition to state level officers like DSP or ACP. That means it is whenever a organized crime will now have a linkage with terrorism, rather than the investigation with the state government, it suddenly becomes a federal issue. Why? Now because the NIA can investigate it, right? Let's look at the government e-marketplace. Now the government e-marketplace procurement crosses 2 lakh crore on buying activity. Now we must appreciate that what are we doing here? GEM. So GEM we started in 2016 and it runs under Ministry of Commerce. Now it is nothing but a platform. The way we have Flipkart, Amazon. So similarly, it's a government platform where the government can go for procurement. So now the question is, we are procuring what? So in the marketplace, we are procuring, let's say, cars. We are going for ambulances. We are going for tractors also. Or let's say a gel pen. Or let's say A4 sheets, paper, printer, office furniture. So the government usually would go for a tender, and then people would apply, and then it became a tedious process. Now, what do we want? We want more and more participation of people. More and more participation of people. So we created this government e-marketplace, and today the gross volumes have crossed more than 4.5 lakh crores since it was created. And yearly now, this year it is stipulated to go over 3 lakh crores. So that is a good feat. Now also there are a lot of resellers on this e-marketplace. So what happens is that one particular fridge is being shunted out of an embassy, and that shunted fridge can then be refurbished and can be used in, let's say, another department which requires the fridge for 3 months. So that wastage is also being cut. Now what happens when we have e-marketplace is that this is government of India, this is, let's say, government of states, various departments, PSUs, so multiple departments, they want to buy a lot of things for their office, for their day-to-day activity. They want to procure 10 SUVs, right? So what will happen is that they usually used to go individually. So now what we have is a single platform where all the sellers, so this seller can include the OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. So let's say there is a sports utility vehicle that the government wants, a 4x4 vehicle. So this SUV will be provided by the original equipment manufacturer, that is Mahindra only. And so they can directly sell to the government with a listed price, and there can also be changes in price based upon reverse bidding, and there will be bids placed. So what are the features? So there will be e-bidding, reverse e-auction, and demand aggregation. And then if there is no supplier, then they can go for a global tender also, where the designated, let's say, experts or suppliers, they can then apply with their prices. So this helps in public procurement, and it brings a lot of transparency in public procurement. It reduces a lot of crony capitalism. Why? Because all the transactions are happening and without the human interface. Still, there are methods to naturally go for some favoritism by using, let's say, names of the companies. Still, the chronism and the transparency that has increased. So there is more transparency, efficiency, speed in public procurement, and reduction of human interface, which reduces what? It reduces petty corruption. Whenever we are going for reduction of human interface, we are reducing petty corruption. Let's say 100 rupees being paid just to submit the form, or to ensure that the form, or let's say 1000 rupees so that my form is on the top 10 in the sequence. So all those things, these are petty corruption. Then this also gives a lot of opportunity to whom? To, let's say, startups. Because if you go to this website and you browse, then what happens? In every thumbnail of a product, there will be some markers. So if it is a startup, then it will be written Startup India. So that tells us that it is a product coming from a startup. Also, some good initiatives under the government e-marketplace is that opening of a stores, individual stores of, let's say, tribes of India, or Saras, or Ajivika. So National Rural Livelihood Mission. So self-help group. So these self-help group are, let's say, going for a chadar, or let's say a shawl, or let's say a handicraft material. They want to sell. Let's say there is a good painting, a gold art that the Ajivika mission wants to sell. So they have also individual stores, the way we have individual stores or brand stores in our, let's say, Flipkart, Amazon, Myntra, etc. Let's look at retail inflation. So retail inflation has eased to a 4-month low to 4.87% in October. Now let's understand that we are essentially referring to CPI inflation. And this CPI inflation is used, why? It is used by the Monetary Policy Committee of the RBI to go for benchmarking of its repo rate. And whenever there is high inflation, it leads to increase in repo rate, which makes capital more scarce or more expensive. And so the already existing loans, they also become expensive, and the uptake of new loans decreases. So it dampens the demand for loans if there is high inflation. And if there is, let's say, inflation within 4 to 6% of band, then it shows a good industrial production, a good growth. And in such times, a repo rate can be relaxed to boost more growth. Or if it is, let's say, below the 4% mark, then also naturally the repo rate is relaxed so that the capital becomes more cheaper and people are going for more loans to boost more industrial activity or to boost more growth. Now there are four types of CPI, consumer price index, that is CPI for industrial workers. Now, CPI for industrial workers is calculated by Labor Bureau in the Ministry of Labor. Then we have CPI for agricultural labor, again done by Labor Bureau, Ministry of Labor. CPI rural labors, Labor Bureau, Ministry of Labor. And then we have CPI for urban non-manual employees. And this is by NSO, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Now here the base year is 2012, except here there is 2016. Then the Monetary Policy Committee, it will look at the trend of inflation and it will decide on the trajectory of repo rate changes. And the safe band is 4 to 6. That is the safe area in terms of the Monetary Policy Committee. The moment it is above 6, then naturally it calls for action by the Monetary Policy Committee. Thank you so much. I hope it helped.